the Grand Hall of the Galactic Council, a murmur of laughter echoed through the room as representatives from various alien species gathered. The humans were present, but their fleet, once mighty and feared across the stars, was now dismissed as nothing more than an ancient relic. Admiral Kale, a towering figure from the Halar Empire, stood before the council with a mocking smile on his face. He was the one who had first spoken out, calling the humans' fleet outdated and obsolete. The so-called Relic fleet, he said, waving his hand dismissively, is nothing more than a museum piece. It's a collection of forgotten technology, not a threat to any modern force in the galaxy. The other alien representatives laughed, some louder than others. It was clear that they shared Kel's belief. Humanity's fleet was no more than a joke. Earth, once the center of a powerful empire, had been reduced to a tiny fraction of its former glory. The galaxy had long moved on, evolving into advanced technologies that left humanity's old ships in the dust. At the far end of the room, a group of human delegates stood quietly, their faces emotionless. Admiral Jonas, the leader of the human delegation, kept his expression neutral, though his mind was racing. He had heard these insults before. But this time, the humans had a plan, one they had kept hidden for years. Despite the ridicule, the humans remained calm. They had learned not to react to such insults, but inside, a fire burned in their hearts. They knew their fleet was far from obsolete. It was time to show the galaxy the truth. You see, Kel continued, when the galaxy looks at Earth, they see a primitive species trying to catch up with those who evolved beyond them. But these relics of yours, they won't stand a chance against a true military power. The laughter in the hall grew louder, but Jonas didn't flinch. He could feel the tension rising within him, but he held his ground. His eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of every alien in the chamber. They all underestimated humanity, just as they had before. But things were about to change. "You're mistaken, Kel," Jonas finally said, his voice calm yet firm. "You don't understand what we've done. These ships you mock, they are far more dangerous than you realize." For a moment, the laughter in the room quieted. Some of the alien delegates exchanged confused looks. Was the human admiral serious? The idea that these outdated ships could pose a threat seemed impossible, but there was something in Jonas's voice, something they couldn't quite ignore. Kale chuckled. "Really? You think these relics are a match for the Halar Empire? A match for my fleet?" He turned to his own officers, all of them seated at the front, their expressions filled with smug confidence. The other delegates joined in his laughter, dismissing Jonas's words as nothing more than a desperate attempt to save face. They didn't know it yet, but this was the last time they would laugh at the human fleet. Jonas stood tall, knowing that his words had not swayed the council. But it wasn't words that would prove humanity's strength. It was action. And soon, the galaxy would see that humanity's relic fleet was anything but weak. Behind closed doors, as the council session continued, the final preparations were being made. The human fleet was not what it seemed. It had been hidden for decades, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The technology inside those old warships was far more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Jonas knew that once the fleet was activated, it would be too late for the aliens to turn back. They had laughed, mocked, and underestimated the humans for too long. Now, humanity's time had come. The next day, the Halar Empire and its allies were preparing for their next mission. They had no idea that they were about to face a force they had mocked, a fleet they had laughed at for being outdated and useless. And then, it happened. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, the Relic fleet came to life. The human warships, dormant for years, powered up with an eerie hum that rippled through space. The ships, built with technology thought lost to time, awakened with a power no one could have predicted. The Halar Empire's fleet, confident and powerful, was about to meet an enemy unlike any it had ever encountered. The laughter from the Galactic Council would soon turn into fear, because the human fleet had just revealed its true strength. And for the first time in a long while, the galaxy would learn that humanity had never been weak, merely waiting. As the ships powered up and their engines roared to life, the aliens had no idea what was coming. The battle was about to begin, and it would be one they would never forget. The Relic fleet roars to life. The tension in the Galactic Council chambers remained thick after Admiral Jonas's warning. The alien representatives were still recovering from their laughter, but there was a slight change in the air. Though no one admitted it, a nagging feeling started to form in their minds. Could the humans really have something more to their old fleet? Could those ships, once dismissed as useless, be more than they appeared? Meanwhile, far from the prying eyes of the Council, the human fleet was undergoing a transformation. The warships, some decades old, began to glow with an intense, almost otherworldly energy. The energy shields flickered into place, and their weapon systems powered up, sending pulses of light into the surrounding darkness of space. On board the flagship, Admiral Jonas stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the display. Every member of his crew had worked tirelessly for years to restore and enhance the old ships. And now, it was time to show the galaxy that humanity was far from defeated. The ships were not just relics. They had been meticulously rebuilt, enhanced with technology from a forgotten era. An era when humanity ruled the stars. "Ready the fleet," Jonas ordered, his voice calm yet filled with determination. "We've waited long enough. Today, the galaxy will see the true power of humanity." In the hangars of the fleet, technicians and engineers worked swiftly, making final adjustments to the ships. The once aging vessels, covered in layers of dust and time, now hummed with life. Their hulls, strengthened with a combination of ancient alloys and new materials, stood ready for battle. The vast arrays of weapon systems, some long forgotten by the rest of the galaxy, were armed and ready to fire. Far from the human fleet, the Halar Empire was preparing for its own mission. Its warships, sleek and modern, moved into position. Admiral Kale was confident. His fleet had won countless battles against weaker enemies. What threat could humanity pose with their outdated ships? Little did Kale know, his arrogance was about to cost him dearly. Back in the depths of space, the Relic fleet entered hyperspace. As the ships moved into position, Jonas could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. These were the ships of Earth's past, the ships that had once fought in wars that the galaxy had forgotten. And now, they were ready to fight once more. The first target was the Halar Empire's fleet. It was an audacious move, attacking the Empire itself. But Jonas knew the time for diplomacy was over. The galaxy had mocked humanity for too long. It was time to remind them of who they were. "Engage the fleet," Jonas ordered. "Let's show them what humanity is capable of." At that moment, every ship in the fleet powered up, their engines roaring to life as they accelerated into the vast unknown. The Halar Empire's fleet, so sure of its superiority, had no idea what was coming. As the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, the galaxy's greatest powers were about to witness the impossible. Humanity's relic ships were alive, and they were more deadly than anyone had imagined. The Halar Empire's fleet. Admiral Kale stood at the center of his command room, staring at the holographic display of the human fleet's last known position. "Those old ships will be no match for us," he muttered confidently. The fleet around him was vast, its ships gleaming with modern technology. It had been years since the Empire had encountered anything that could pose a real threat. The human fleet, supposedly lost to time, was no different, or so he thought. The comms officer broke the silence. "Admiral, the human fleet has emerged from hyperspace. They are much closer than we anticipated." Kale frowned. He had expected the humans to be on the other side of the galaxy. How had they arrived so quickly? The answer was soon revealed. Through the darkness of space, the human fleet slowly emerged, a massive formation of ships, vast, towering, and bristling with weapons. Each warship was a monument to an age long past, yet they were far from being relics. They had been rebuilt, reforged into something new. The human fleet was not what Cal had expected. It was far more than he had ever dreamed. Impossible, Cal whispered. How could they? Before he could finish his thought, a series of bright flashes filled the space before him. The human ships fired their weapons, sending waves of destruction toward the Halar Empire's fleet. The first round of laser blasts struck the lead Halar warship, shaking it violently. Shields flared to life, but the sheer power of the blasts caused cracks in the shield's structure. The Empire's fleet, caught off guard, struggled to respond. They had underestimated humanity. Again. Return fire, Cal shouted, but his voice wavered with uncertainty. The human fleet had proven far more powerful than anyone had predicted. He Halar Empire's desperate response. The battle raged in the cold expanse of space, the silence of the void shattered by the deafening roar of energy blasts and the clang of distant metal tearing apart. The Halar Empire, once so confident in their military superiority, was now reeling from the unexpected onslaught. Their sleek, advanced ships struggled to hold their ground against the relentless power of humanity's Relic fleet. Admiral Cal paced back and forth in his command center, his brow furrowed with frustration. His fleet was in disarray, the once perfect formations now scattered as they desperately tried to defend themselves. The human warships, with their powerful shields and deadly weaponry, seemed to be everywhere. The Empire's laser beams deflected off the human ships' energy shields with ease, while the retaliatory fire from the humans tore through the Halar lines like a knife through paper. Admiral, our lead ship has taken heavy damage. A voice shouted from the communications panel. The shields are failing. We need to retreat. Cal's grip tightened around the edge of the console. His mind raced. Retreat? No, he couldn't let it end like this. His entire career had been built on the belief that the Halar Empire was invincible, that no one could challenge their might. The humans, mere relics of a forgotten age, should never have been able to put up such a fight. There had to be a way to turn the tide. Get me the fleet commander, Cal barked. Within moments, the holographic image of his second-in-command, Captain Jorik, appeared in front of him. The captain's face was grim, his uniform stained with the signs of battle. We need to re-strategize, sir, Jorik said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. These humans are not like any other enemy we've encountered. They're ships. They're more powerful than we imagined. Cal nodded, his mind still grasping for a solution. We underestimated them. Jorik, we can't let them destroy us here. We need a new approach. Get the rest of the fleet to regroup and form at the defensive perimeter. We'll launch a full counteroffensive. Bring in reinforcements from the outer sectors if you have to. Jorik hesitated, clearly not convinced. Admiral, reinforcements are still days away. It could be too late by then. Then we fight with what we have. Cal snapped. Do it, Jorik. We can't let them humiliate us. The Halar Empire will not fall to a handful of old ships. The human fleet's relentless advance. Back in the human fleet, Admiral Jonas watched with satisfaction as the Halar Empire's ships struggled to maintain their formation. The Relic fleet had already proved more than a match for the Empire's forces. Each ship in the human fleet was a work of art, crafted with technology and weapons that were centuries ahead of anything the galaxy had seen. But Jonas knew that this was only the beginning. His ship, the U.S. Resolute, led the charge, its massive cannons unleashing devastating energy blasts that rocked the Halar vessels. The crew aboard the flagship were operating with perfect synchronization, each member performing their task flawlessly. The battle was a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. Admiral, a voice called from the communications panel. We've received a distress signal from one of our scout ships. They've encountered a new wave of Halar reinforcements. Jonah's eyes narrowed. The Halar Empire wasn't going to give up that easily. Patch the signal through. Let's see what we're dealing with. The image of a damaged human scout ship appeared on the screen. Its hull was scorched, and its transmission was shaky, but the message was clear. "We've encountered multiple Halar battle groups, sir," the scout's captain said, his voice strained. "They've regrouped and are coming at us full force. We need backup now." Jonas glanced at his crew, his jaw tightening. The odds were shifting again. The Halar Empire wasn't just retreating. They were preparing to launch a counterattack of their own. But Jonas wasn't about to back down. "Get our fleet into position," Jonas ordered. "We'll hold our ground. Prepare the main cannons and ready the fighters. If the Halar think they can overwhelm us, they're about to learn just how wrong they are." The Halar's new tactics. On the Halar flagship, Kel watched as his fleet rallied, forming a new line of defense. The humans had already proven they could strike hard, but Kel had a plan to turn the tide in his favor. He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare the cloaking devices," Kel commanded. "We will engage the humans from the shadows. They may be powerful, but they are not prepared for what we have." The tactical officer hesitated for a moment before nodding. "A cloaking maneuver, Admiral. It's risky. Our shields won't be able to handle it for long." Kel's gaze hardened. "Risk is our only option now. Initiate the cloaking sequence." The Empire's fleet began to shimmer, their ships disappearing from sight. The humans would have no idea where the next attack was coming from. It was a dangerous gambit, but it was the only one that might save them. The ambush and the human response. The silence of space was unbearable. For a moment, it felt as though the universe had paused, holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. The Halar Empire had disappeared into the shadows of their cloaking technology, leaving the human fleet with nothing but uncertainty. The void stretched on, empty and threatening. Admiral Jonas stood at the helm of the U.S. Resolute, his hands tightly gripping the edge of the command console. The tension was palpable, but he refused to let his crew see it. This was what they had trained for. This was the moment where humanity's resolve would be tested. "Admiral," the voice called out. It was Lieutenant Vera, one of the fleet's senior officers. Her eyes were glued to the sensor screen, her fingers flying over the controls. "We're picking up strange readings. The drones are returning. But something isn't right. There's a pattern to the signals." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "What kind of pattern?" "It's like they're preparing for an ambush," she said, her voice calm but laced with concern. "They've regrouped. It's not just one fleet coming at us. It's multiple fleets converging on our position. They've been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment." A grim silence fell over the command room. The Halar Empire wasn't retreating. They were surrounding them. It was a trap. "Get the fleet into formation," Jonas barked. "We need to tighten our perimeter. No more surprises." The Halar Empire's hidden advantage. Far away, hidden behind the cloak of their advanced technology, Admiral Kel watched from the shadows. His heart pounded with a strange mix of hope and dread. The humans had fallen right into his trap. The Empire's fleet was positioned in the perfect pattern, ready to strike with deadly precision. The cloak had worked. They couldn't see them. "Admiral, we're in position," Captain Jorik reported, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "We can engage at any moment." Cale nodded, his face set in a determined frown. "This is our chance. Attack at will." As if on command, the Halar ships broke the cloak, emerging from the darkness in a coordinated wave. The human fleet was surrounded on all sides. The Halar's advanced weaponry was aimed directly at the human ships, ready to fire. In the chaos, a lone scout ship, a small, nimble craft, darted between the enemy lines. It had been equipped with specialized tracking technology to locate Halar ships in the cloak. The Halar fleet was skilled at hiding, but no one could outrun the sensors of a human ship that had been designed to hunt the shadows. "Admiral," Vera said again, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding before them. "We've got them. The Halar are in position, but we have something they don't expect." Jonas looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The scout ship," she said, her eyes wide with realization. "It's revealing their positions. We can see them now. Jonas' heart raced. This was their moment. The tide had turned once more. Activate the main cannons, he ordered. Let's show them what we're made of. The battle escalates. The U.S. Resolute fired first, its massive energy cannons lighting up the darkness of space. A beam of concentrated power shot through the void, hitting one of the Heller ships dead on. The vessel exploded in a burst of flames, its remains drifting into the cold emptiness. The other Heller ships quickly retaliated, their weapons lashing out in a series of deadly strikes. But the humans were ready. With the scout ship's information, they had calculated the Heller's positions. The Heller couldn't hide anymore. Human warships launched their own counterattacks, striking the Heller fleet with precision. Their shields held for a moment, but they weren't designed to withstand the power of the human weapons. One by one, the Heller ships were torn apart, their defenses failing under the relentless assault. Admiral Kell watched in horror as his fleet began to crumble. His ships, once thought invincible, were no match for the power of the human warships. The Empire's hopes of victory were slipping through his fingers. "Admiral, we can't hold much longer," Jorik shouted. "The humans have our positions. We need to retreat." Kell's eyes burned with frustration. "No, we will not retreat. Not yet." But deep down, he knew the truth. The Heller Empire was losing. The humans had the upper hand, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The final push. As the battle raged on, Jonas knew it was time to end it. His fleet had broken the Heller's defenses, but there was still a final step to take. The U.S. Resolute and the rest of the human fleet pushed forward, moving into the heart of the Heller formation. The Heller had nowhere left to run. The human ships fired their final barrage, their energy blasts flooding the battlefield. The Heller ships were caught in a crossfire, their shields unable to hold up against the constant barrage. One by one, they began to fall. Jonas gave the order to deliver the final blow. The U.S. Resolute's main cannon powered up, and in a flash, it released a devastating energy wave that tore through the Heller flagship. For a moment, there was nothing. The Heller fleet's largest ship was completely obliterated, its destruction sending shockwaves through the rest of the Empire's forces. Cliffhanger/end of Part 4. The surviving Heller ships, now in disarray, began to retreat. But Admiral Kell, his heart heavy with defeat, issued one final order. "Prepare the self-destruct sequence. If we cannot win, we will make sure the humans don't leave this battlefield unscathed." The final desperate move of the Heller Empire was coming, but would the humans be able to stop it in time? The Heller's desperate gamble. The battle was far from over. As the remains of the Heller flagship drifted in space, the remaining Heller ships began to scatter, desperate to escape the humans' relentless pursuit. But their retreat wasn't the end. It was a signal that the Heller Empire had one last card to play, and they were going to use it, no matter the cost. Admiral Kell stood in his command center, his hands shaking slightly as he watched the chaos unfold on the screens in front of him. His fleet was crumbling, his best ships reduced to smoldering debris. But there was still a chance, a final, desperate move that might just turn the tide back in his favor. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Captain Jorik asked, his voice calm but laced with concern. "The humans are pushing us back. We're nearly out of time." Kell's jaw clenched. He knew what had to be done. There was no more room for hesitation. "Prepare the self-destruct sequence," Kell ordered, his voice cold and detached. "We're going to take them down with us. If we cannot win, then they will pay the price for their arrogance." Jorik hesitated for a brief moment, his eyes flicking to the screens that showed the humans' advancing fleet. "Are you sure? If we destroy ourselves, we may take some of them with us, but there's a good chance." "I'm sure," Kell cut him off. "We'll make them regret ever challenging the Heller Empire." The Heller Empire's final assault. On the bridge of the U.S. Resolute, Admiral Jonas and his crew were preparing for the final push. The Heller fleet was retreating, but there was something about their movements that didn't feel right. The Hailer weren't fleeing. Something was off. Jonas could feel it deep in his gut. "Admiral, the Hailer ships are moving into a formation," Vera reported, her eyes scanning the tactical display. "They're preparing something. We can't tell what it is, but they're converging." Jonas narrowed his eyes, knowing that the Hailer weren't giving up without a fight. "Brace for impact," he ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "They're not running. They're planning something." And just as Jonas had predicted, the Hailer ships began to glow with an ominous energy. It was too late to stop them. "Admiral," Lieutenant Vera cried out, her voice filled with urgency. "They've activated the self-destruct sequences. If they detonate, we'll be caught in the blast radius." The crew of the U.S. Resolute sprang into action, trying desperately to calculate a way to escape the blast. But it was clear, if they didn't act fast, they would be obliterated in a devastating chain reaction. "Get us out of here," Jonas barked. "Full speed ahead now." The U.S. Resolute lurched forward, engines roaring as it shot away from the encroaching Hailer ships. But the Hailer weren't done yet. In a final act of defiance, their ships, now glowing bright with energy, began to move toward the human fleet, positioning themselves in a deadly coordinated pattern. If the self-destructs detonated in a chain, the resulting explosion would be catastrophic. The human fleet's dilemma. The humans knew the danger was coming. They could feel the weight of the Hailer Empire's final gamble in the air. The Hailer had made their decision. They were going to take the humans down, even if it meant sacrificing everything. "Admiral," Vera shouted again, her voice trembling. "The blast radius is too wide. We won't make it out in time. We need to disable their self-destruct systems." Jonas felt his stomach drop. He knew the odds were slim, but it was their only chance. "Send all available units to the Hailer flagship. We need to disable their core before it detonates. Move fast." The U.S. Resolute and several other human ships turned toward the remaining Hailer flagship, now a massive beacon of destructive energy. But as the ships closed in, they found themselves surrounded by a barrage of missiles, lasers, and energy blasts. The Hailer were not going to go down easily. "We need to break through," Jonas shouted. "Deploy the attack drones. We can't waste any more time." The final countdown. The drones shot forward, cutting through the chaos of battle, each one aimed directly at the Hailer flagship's core. As the U.S. Resolute and its supporting fleet fired their weapons at the Hailer ships, Jonas watched in horror as more and more missiles and energy blasts began to hit the Resolute's shields. The explosion from the Hailer flagship was coming closer with every passing second. "Status report, Vera," Jonas demanded. The young officer's face was pale, her hands shaking. "We've breached their defenses. The self-destruct system is almost disabled, but we're running out of time. It's a matter of minutes." Jonas' heart raced. He didn't know how much longer they had. The Hailer flagship's core was now dangerously close to ignition, and the chain reaction would be unstoppable if it detonated. Cliffhanger/end of Part 5. With seconds to spare, the Resolute's final barrage of energy pulses slammed into the Hailer flagship's core, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. But the core was still unstable. The countdown to destruction continued, and it was clear that the explosion would come at any moment. "Admiral," Vera said quietly, "we have a choice. We can pull back and try to escape, or we can make one final push to ensure the Hailer won't take us with them." Jonas hesitated, staring at the shimmering core, feeling the weight of his decision. If he chose wrong, they would all die. The fate of humanity's victory now hung in the balance. The last stand. The clock was ticking. The Hailer flagship was teetering on the edge of total destruction, and the humans knew that if they didn't act fast, the entire battlefield would become their tomb. The Hailer had made their final move, and now it was up to humanity to prevent their twisted gamble from taking everyone down. On the bridge of the U.S. Resolute, Admiral Jonas paced back and forth, his mind racing. They had breached the Haler flagship's defenses, but the core was still unstable. If they didn't find a way to shut it down completely, the chain reaction would spread across the entire fleet, destroying everything in its path. "We're almost there, Admiral," Vera reported, her voice tense. "We've disabled the Heller ships surrounding the flagship. The drones are almost in position to disable the self-destruct system." Jonas nodded, trying to keep his cool. "Time is running out. We need that core offline, or we'll lose everything." His eyes fixed on the glowing core of the Heller flagship on the tactical screen. The energy surges were growing more intense, like a storm about to burst. Every second that passed brought them closer to the inevitable explosion. The human fleet's race against time. The U.S. Resolute wasn't the only ship trying to save humanity. Throughout the battlefield, human warships were desperately pushing forward, trying to contain the growing chaos. The Haler fleet was in disarray, some ships still fighting back, while others were caught in the destruction of their own making. "Admiral, the Haler are trying to regroup," Captain Jorik reported from the tactical station. "They're sending everything they have left toward us. We can't hold them off for long." Jonas glanced at the map, seeing the remaining Haler ships closing in. Their numbers were dwindling, but the ships they had left were powerful and desperate. If the humans couldn't disable the self-destruct system soon, the explosion would destroy them all. "Hold them off for as long as you can," Jonas ordered, his voice cold and focused. "We need those drones to finish their job. Everyone else, focus on the flagship." The final push. On board the Resolute, every officer and crew member was in full combat mode. The tension was palpable, and the hum of energy systems filled the air as they prepared for the final push. Jonas could feel the pressure weighing on him. The fate of his crew, the fleet, and humanity's future rested on his shoulders. "Admiral, the drones are almost at the core," Vera said, her voice tight with anxiety. "We need to give them cover. The Heller ships are moving in fast." Jonas clenched his fists. He couldn't afford to let the drones fail. If they didn't succeed, the explosion would wipe them all out in a single devastating blast. "Get us closer to the flagship," Jonas barked. "We'll make a final assault. Hold nothing back. The drones need time." The Resolute surged forward, its weapons blazing, as it tore through the remaining Haler forces. The human warships followed in formation, unleashing wave after wave of firepower, drawing the attention of the Heller ships away from the drones. But the Haler weren't giving up. Their ships fired back, desperate to stop the humans from reaching the flagship. The space around them was a violent blur of explosions, energy beams, and chaos. The heart-stopping moment. Jonas watched as the drones made their final approach toward the Haler flagship's core. It was the most dangerous part of the mission. They had to deactivate the self-destruct system and stop the countdown before it was too late. "Status report on the drones," Jonas demanded. The bridge fell silent as the crew waited for the answer. Every eye was fixed on the tactical screen, watching as the drones maneuvered through the dangerous field of debris and remaining Haler ships. "We've breached the core," Vera said breathlessly. "The self-destruct system is almost disabled." But then, a sudden blast rocked the ship, knocking everyone off their feet. The Resolute's shields flared as the blast hit their hull. Jonas struggled to maintain his balance, his mind racing as he looked toward the source of the explosion. "Admiral," Vera shouted, "the Haler flagship's core is fluctuating. They've triggered a final overload sequence." Jonas's heart sank. It wasn't over yet. The Haler had one final card to play. If they couldn't shut it down completely, the explosion would be worse than anything they'd imagined. It would not only take out the human fleet, but could also send shockwaves that would ripple across the galaxy. A desperate gamble. The drones had done their part, but the core was still unstable. The self-destruct system had been disabled, but the overload could still ignite a catastrophic blast. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Jorik asked, his voice tight with urgency. "If we don't pull back now, we'll be caught in the blast radius." Jonas looked at the tactical screen, where the Hailer flagship was glowing brighter by the second. They had no more time to waste. The choice was clear. They had to make a final, desperate move to ensure the survival of their fleet. "Charge the engines," Jonas commanded. "We're going straight for the Hailer flagship." The Resolute raced toward the flagship, the final fiery gamble that would either save or doom them all. Jonas knew the risks, but there was no turning back now. The last moment of glory. Time seemed to stretch as the U.S. Resolute raced toward the Hailer flagship. The bridge crew braced themselves, hands gripping their stations as their ship tore through the vast emptiness of space. The massive Hailer warship loomed ahead, its once proud form now glowing with the terrifying energy of a core on the verge of detonation. The countdown was relentless. Every second that passed felt like an eternity, and every heartbeat reminded Jonas that they were running out of time. "Admiral, we have to pull back. The core's energy is spiking." Vera's voice cracked through the tension-filled air of the bridge. But Jonas couldn't pull back. Not now. If they did, the resulting explosion would wipe out every ship within 100 light-years. The only way to stop it was to ensure the core went critical, but also that it didn't explode until the last possible moment. "We're going straight for it," Jonas barked, his voice unwavering. "Engines at full power. All guns, fire as we approach." The Resolute surged forward, its massive weapons unleashing hell as it advanced. The Hailer flagship, already unstable and shaken by the damage, turned all its remaining firepower on the human ship. Explosions rocked the Resolute, shaking its frame, but the crew held on. "We can't take much more of this," Jorik shouted from the tactical station, his face pale from the stress. Jonas didn't flinch. He knew what was at stake. This final charge was humanity's last chance. The clash of titans. As the Resolute closed in, the Hailer flagship's defenses flared to life in a desperate attempt to stop the humans. The air crackled with energy as beams of destructive light shot out, striking the Resolute's shields holding at 12%. Vera reported, her voice strained. The human ship was making its final push, using every ounce of power it had left. The Resolute's engines roared as they tore toward the Hailer flagship, the human crew pushing themselves to their limits. "Impact in 30 seconds, Jorik called out. "We need to get closer if we want to have a chance to stop the detonation." Jonas's gaze remained fixed on the Hailer flagship, the glowing core at its center. The countdown was getting dangerously close. It was now or never. A glimmer of hope. Suddenly, a series of explosions erupted from the Hailer flagship, rocking it from within. It was the drones. They had done their part, disabling key components of the self-destruct system. But the core was still unstable. "We've bought ourselves a few more seconds," Vera said, but her voice lacked conviction. But that's all. Jonas didn't need more than that. He knew what needed to be done. The Resolute was now within range, and the final gamble was at hand. The final countdown. "Engage manual override," Jonas ordered. "We're going to disable the core manually." A deadly silence fell over the bridge. Everyone knew what this meant. If they got too close, they wouldn't have enough time to escape. The blast radius from a core going critical would be instantaneous, swallowing them all whole. Jonas stood tall, his mind calculating the risk. He had no illusions about the danger, but he also knew that humanity had always survived by taking bold actions when others hesitated. The bridge crew worked quickly, tapping in commands and engaging systems, as the Resolute accelerated toward the heart of the Hailer flagship. 15 seconds to impact, Jorik reported, sweat dripping from his brow. Jonas nodded. It was now or never. The moment of truth. As the Resolute closed the distance, a shockwave erupted from the Hailer flagship, its defenses failing under the weight of the human assault. The Resolute shuddered, its hull creaking under the strain. Jonas glanced at the screen, counting the seconds. Prepare for detonation. Eject all remaining escape pods. Get ready to abandon ship if we don't make it. But he didn't expect to abandon ship. Not today. The Resolute's crew had fought too hard to fail now. 5 seconds, Vera said, her voice steady but tense. The moment was upon them. The ship lurched forward, the gap closing. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The Resolute collided with the flagship. The impossible escape. For a moment, everything went white. A massive explosion engulfed the bridge, and the ship was rocked as it was thrown violently backward. The entire crew was thrown to the floor, tumbling across consoles as the lights flickered. The seconds seemed to drag on for eternity. Then, in a sudden instant, everything stopped. A new dawn. When Jonas opened his eyes, he was lying on the cold floor of the Resolute. His body ached, but he could still move. His ears rang, and the lights on the bridge were flickering weakly, but the ship was still intact. He rose slowly, his legs shaking beneath him. "Report," he shouted, his voice hoarse. One by one, his crew members began to rise from the wreckage. Vera was the first to speak. "We did it. The core is gone. It's over." Jonas let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Haler flagship had been destroyed, its self-destruct system deactivated at the last possible moment. They had won. The Haler fleet was in disarray, and humanity had just secured its place as the galaxy's strongest force. "We survived," Jorik said, grinning, "against all odds." Jonas looked out at the space around them. The battlefield was littered with the remains of Haler ships, and the human fleet stood victorious. It had been a long, hard fight, but humanity had prevailed. "We've proven that we will never back down," Jonas said, his voice firm. "The galaxy will know that humanity is not a force to be reckoned with." The Galactic Council's meeting. The Galactic Council was not a place for casual conversations. It was where the most powerful beings in the universe came together to discuss the fate of entire star systems. On this particular day, the members of the council were gathered in a grand, circular chamber, surrounded by screens displaying data from across the galaxy. Each member was seated on a throne-like chair, their faces grave as they prepared for the meeting. Today, something was different. Today, the council would discuss a secret they had uncovered about Earth, something that would change everything. A tall, intimidating figure stood at the center of the room. His name was Zorath, leader of the Vornaxians, a species known for their strength and cunning. He looked down at the rest of the council, his voice low but commanding. "We have received disturbing reports from our scouts. There is something happening on Earth. Something unexpected." The room fell silent. For centuries, Earth had been viewed as a primitive planet, filled with simple humans who lacked the power or knowledge to compete with the advanced species of the galaxy. The Council had ignored Earth for most of its existence, but now things were changing. Another member of the Council, an elegant and sharp-eyed being known as Lyra, the High Ambassador of the Seraphim, spoke next. "What exactly are we dealing with, Zorath? What have your scouts discovered?" Zorath paused, his eyes narrowing as he thought about the reports he had received. "It's not just one thing," he began. "There are multiple reports of strange energy fluctuations coming from the planet, power levels that should be impossible for a species like them to generate. These fluctuations are unlike anything we've seen before." The room was filled with whispers. Members of the council exchanged uneasy glances. The Seraphim were known for their advanced technology, and even they were cautious about what they had just heard. Lyra leaned forward in her chair, her wings flicking slightly in agitation. "Impossible. How can humans, of all species, be capable of such power?" Zorath turned toward a large screen at the back of the room. The screen displayed a map of Earth and surrounding space. Energy signatures glowed in various colors, moving in ways that were utterly unfamiliar. "We have examined the data carefully. These signals are coming from deep beneath the Earth's surface. Something is stirring. Another voice interrupted the tension in the room. It was Caldra, the ancient leader of the Ciphers, a species known for their wisdom. We know Earth is full of strange phenomena. But this, she shook her head. The humans have never been able to harness such energy. Their ships are basic, their weapons primitive. Zoreth gave her a knowing look. I thought the same thing at first. But this is no ordinary energy. This is something far more advanced than what any species has ever discovered. The humans, they've tapped into something we didn't think they could. Something powerful. The council members were silent, absorbing the weight of his words. A few exchanged glances, their skepticism slowly fading. If what Zoreth was saying was true, Earth had become a much more dangerous place. I've made arrangements for a small fleet to investigate. Zoreth continued. We will send in a group of ships to confirm the source of these energy signals. The humans must be contained before this power spreads further. Lyra frowned, her eyes flashing with concern. We should be careful, Zoreth. If what you're saying is true, this could be a game changer, but we cannot underestimate the humans. They've shown a surprising ability to adapt, especially in times of crisis. We may be dealing with a species that is far more dangerous than we realize. Zoreth nodded grimly. I'm aware, but we cannot allow them to gain control of such power. If they do, the balance of the galaxy could shift in their favor. A tense silence fell over the council as the members contemplated what Zoreth had said. Earth, the so-called primitive planet, had just become the greatest unknown in the galaxy. A planet once dismissed as insignificant now held the key to a secret that could change everything. Caldra spoke again, her voice steady but filled with caution. We must act carefully. The humans may have more to offer than we initially thought. But if they can harness this power, there is no telling what they might do with it. We must proceed with caution. If we provoke them too much, we could face a conflict unlike any we've ever seen. Zoreth turned to her with a hard look. I am not proposing a war, Caldra, but we cannot sit back and allow them to grow stronger. We must know the truth, and we must control it. The tension in the room was palpable. Each council member knew that this was more than just a simple mission. This was about the future of the galaxy. If Earth had truly unlocked a power like no other, it could reshape the entire universe's power structure. The Council's position at the top of the galactic hierarchy was no longer as secure as it had once been. As the meeting drew to a close, the members of the Council made their decisions. The plan was set. Zoreth would lead the investigation, and a fleet would be dispatched to Earth to uncover the truth. They would find out exactly what humanity had discovered, and they would ensure it didn't threaten their control over the galaxy. But as Zoreth left the council chambers, his mind was heavy with doubt. He had never underestimated the humans before, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into something far more dangerous than he had anticipated, something that could change everything. And Earth would never be the same again. The mysterious energy signals. The moment the council's meeting adjourned, Zoreth and his fleet commanders set to work. The task ahead was clear, yet the questions about Earth's newfound power lingered like a heavy cloud in his mind. He couldn't shake the unease he felt, a gnawing sensation that something about this mission was far more complicated than he had anticipated. Zoreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vornax, a massive vessel built for both diplomacy and warfare. Around him, the crew of Vornaxians worked in perfect harmony, their movements swift and precise as they readied for the journey to Earth. Zoreth couldn't help but glance at the display screen, where Earth appeared as a tiny dot in the vastness of space. We will need to move carefully, Zoreth murmured under his breath. The humans may be more unpredictable than we realize. Beside him, the captain of the ship, Captain Torna, a seasoned warrior with an air of quiet confidence, spoke up. The fleet is ready for departure, Commander Zoreth, but we must be prepared for anything. The energy signatures we detected are not normal. There's no way the humans could have achieved this level of power on their own. Zoreth nodded slowly. That's what concerns me, Captain. There's more to this than we know. The humans may have accidentally unlocked something ancient, something they were never meant to discover. Perhaps, Captain Torna replied. But whatever it is, we need to find it first. We can't afford to let it fall into the wrong hands. With a quick gesture, Zorath ordered the fleet to jump into hyperspace. Within moments, the stars outside the ship's windows stretched into long lines of light, signaling their departure from normal space. As they made their way toward Earth, the atmosphere aboard the ship became tense. Zorath and his crew were aware of the risks. But what choice did they have? If Earth's power remained unchecked, the consequences could be disastrous for the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the situation was far from calm. As the humans had no knowledge of the impending galactic investigation, they remained oblivious to the danger lurking above them. But they, too, had noticed strange things happening in the world. Dr. Amelia Ward, a brilliant scientist working at the Earth's largest research facility, was the first to detect the unusual energy readings. At first, she had thought it was some sort of error, a glitch in the system. But the readings persisted, and as her team analyzed the data, they'd realized that something far more extraordinary was happening beneath their feet. Amelia paced around the lab, her mind racing. The energy signatures had been growing stronger by the day. They appeared to be coming from a deep underground source, far beyond the reach of modern human technology. Her heart raced with excitement. Could it be that humanity had stumbled upon something truly groundbreaking? A new form of energy, something more powerful than anything they had ever known. Her assistant, Greg, entered the room, his face pale. "Dr. Ward, you need to see this." He handed her a tablet, and she quickly scrolled through the data. It confirmed her worst fears. This can't be right," she muttered, her voice trembling. "The energy levels, they're off the charts." Greg nodded, his voice equally strained. "It's not just the energy. We've also detected strange fluctuations in the atmosphere. Something's happening, Amelia. And I don't think we can control it." Amelia took a deep breath. She had been a scientist long enough to know when something truly groundbreaking was happening. And this was no ordinary discovery. This wasn't just an anomaly. It was a sign of something much bigger. But what was it? And more importantly, what would happen if the wrong people found out about it? "We need to keep this quiet," Amelia said firmly. "If anyone else finds out about this before we understand what we're dealing with, it could be catastrophic." But Amelia's warning came too late. She had no way of knowing that her discovery had already reached the ears of other, far more dangerous forces. In the distant reaches of space, the Galactic Council was already on its way to investigate the source of the mysterious energy signals. As Zorath's fleet continued its journey to Earth, the tension in the air grew thicker. The farther they traveled, the more determined Zorath became. The energy signals were growing stronger, and the closer they got to Earth, the more powerful they seemed to become. But one thing was certain: this was no ordinary power. This was something ancient, something beyond anything the Council had ever encountered before. Zorath turned to his crew, his expression serious. "Prepare for a landing near the source of the energy signals. We'll need to get close to the surface to fully understand what we're dealing with. This could be dangerous, so I expect everyone to stay alert." Captain Torna nodded in acknowledgement, and soon the fleet slowed, preparing to enter Earth's atmosphere. Zorath watched as the blue and green planet grew larger before them. There was no turning back now. Whatever Earth was hiding, they were about to uncover it. But what Zorath and his fleet didn't know was that the humans, too, were preparing. Dr. Ward had already begun working on a plan to investigate the mysterious energy source, but she had no idea that the forces of the Galactic Council were already on their way. As the two sides closed in on their shared goal, the stage was set for a collision, one that would reveal Earth's deadliest secret, a secret that would change the galaxy forever: the unveiling of Earth's hidden power. As Zorath's fleet neared Earth, the sense of urgency grew. He could feel the tension on the bridge of the Vornax. His entire crew was on edge, knowing that the energy they were detecting was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't just an anomaly or a simple resource. It was something far more dangerous. Zorath's instincts told him that Earth was hiding something ancient, something deadly. "We are entering Earth's atmosphere," Captain Torna reported, his voice steady but laced with concern. "The energy signature is coming from a location just below the surface. We'll need to land and investigate further." Zorath nodded, his gaze fixed on the planet below. He had no idea what they would find. But one thing was certain: this energy, whatever it was, could change the course of the galaxy. If they failed to control it, it could lead to destruction on a scale no one could predict. "Prepare for landing," Zorath commanded. "Stay vigilant. We don't know what we're walking into." Back on Earth, Dr. Amelia Ward's heart pounded as she watched the results from the energy readings. The underground energy source was growing stronger by the hour, and she was no closer to understanding its origins. Her team had been working tirelessly, but the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. "We're pushing too hard," Greg said, his face pale with worry. "The power levels are rising uncontrollably. If we don't stop this, it could have catastrophic consequences." But Amelia was determined. "We can't stop now. We've uncovered something too important. We need to understand it before anyone else does." As her team continued their research, they remained unaware that a fleet of galactic visitors was approaching Earth. The energy readings were not just of scientific interest. They were a signal that had drawn the attention of forces far beyond Earth's reach. In space, Zorath's ship began its descent through Earth's atmosphere. The ship's massive engines rumbled, shaking slightly as they pushed through the turbulent layers of the planet's air. Zorath's mind raced. They were moments away from landing, but the weight of what was to come pressed down on him. What had Earth discovered, and why had they kept it a secret for so long? The fleet's landing was swift and precise. As the Vornax touched down on the rugged landscape, Zorath ordered his soldiers to prepare for immediate deployment. They had landed near the epicenter of the energy signal, a remote, desolate region far from human civilization. The area was abandoned, giving Zorath's fleet the perfect opportunity to investigate without interference. "We'll move out in squads," Zorath commanded. "Stay alert. This place feels unnatural." Captain Torna nodded, her hand gripping her weapon. "We'll be ready, Commander." On the ground, Dr. Ward's team was struggling to contain the escalating energy levels. They had set up a large containment system near the source, but it was already starting to malfunction. The power was becoming too strong, and the system could barely keep up. "What if we just shut it all down?" Greg asked, panic creeping into his voice. "If we disconnect the power source, maybe we can stop it before it's too late." Amelia's eyes narrowed. "No, we don't know what will happen if we disconnect it. This energy could be unstable, and tampering with it might make things worse." The ground beneath them trembled, and the room shook as the energy level spiked. "We have no choice," Greg said, his voice trembling with fear. "This is going to blow." Amelia's heart raced. She knew they were running out of time, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. She had to know what was powering this energy, where it was coming from, and why it was so powerful. As Zorath and his soldiers ventured deeper into the desolate region of Earth, they felt the power of the energy source growing stronger with every step. It was like a silent force, tugging at the air around them, making everything feel heavy and charged. They arrived at the site, a massive underground complex. The entrance was sealed tight, but the energy signature radiated from beneath the Earth's surface. Zorath knew they were close to their goal. "Prepare the drills," Zorath ordered. "We're going to dig our way in." The soldiers began setting up massive drilling machines, designed to break through Earth's hardened crust. The drills whirred to life, and the ground beneath them started to shake with the force of the machines. But Zorath couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The energy was growing more powerful, and he wasn't sure if the planet's surface would hold up much longer. "Commander," Captain Torna said urgently, "we're detecting movement nearby. Something's approaching." Zoreth's eyes widened. "Prepare for contact. Whatever it is, we're not taking any chances." Meanwhile, Amelia was on the verge of a breakthrough. She had finally isolated the energy's origin. It was coming from a massive underground facility buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. But as she tried to get a more precise reading, the systems started to fail. "The energy levels are off the charts," she muttered. "What is this? Where is it coming from?" She could hear the sound of rumbling in the distance, the unmistakable roar of machinery. Her eyes widened. Was the source of the energy not just a natural phenomenon? Was there something, or someone, actively controlling it? The rumbling grew louder, and Amelia realized the ground was shaking. Something was happening, and she had no idea what it was. The power had become uncontrollable, and soon she would have to face the consequences of her discoveries. She could only hope she wasn't too late to stop it. Both Zoreth and Amelia were unaware of each other's movements, but they were heading toward the same terrifying conclusion. The energy was far beyond anything they had expected. The hidden power beneath Earth's surface was about to be unleashed, and the galaxy would never be the same. As Zoreth and his fleet prepared for an encounter with whatever was emerging from the depths, Amelia scrambled to understand what was causing the chaos. They were both racing against time, but the secrets of Earth were about to shake the very foundation of the galaxy. The stage was set for a showdown, one that could change everything. The rising storm. The ground beneath Zoreth's feet trembled with an intensity that rattled his bones. The drilling machines had torn through Earth's crust, and now something stirred deep within the planet. The air around him hummed with energy, a strange and unearthly power that seemed to push against the very laws of nature. It was unlike anything Zoreth had encountered in all his years of commanding fleets. The power emanating from the ground wasn't just strong. It was alive, pulsating with an ancient force. Zoreth's soldiers remained on high alert, their weapons drawn, ready for whatever might emerge from the depths. There was a growing sense of dread among the crew. They had no idea what was down there, but they all felt the same uneasy pull in their instincts. It was as if the planet itself was resisting their presence, trying to protect whatever secrets it hid beneath its surface. "Commander," Captain Torna's voice broke through the tension. "We've reached the final layer. We're almost through." Zoreth nodded grimly. He could feel the pressure building. This was it. The truth they had been seeking was just beneath the surface. But at what cost? What kind of force could Earth be hiding? A force that had been buried for so long. His mind raced as the anticipation grew. They had no idea what was about to break free. Back on the surface, Amelia Ward's heart raced as she monitored the sudden surge of energy. The readings had gone haywire. What had been a steady, albeit powerful, energy source had suddenly escalated into something far more volatile. It was no longer just a simple energy signature. It was an active force. Amelia had been close to pinpointing the source, but now the situation had spiraled out of control. The containment field was barely holding, and there was no way to stop what was happening. "Dr. Ward," Greg's voice was tense over the comms. "The energy readings are spiking. We need to shut everything down before it blows." Amelia stood frozen, staring at the chaotic data on her screen. "We can't. We still don't understand it. If we stop now, we may destroy everything." But Greg wasn't convinced. "Amelia, it's already out of control. We have to act before it's too late." Her mind raced, weighing the options. The energy was far more than a discovery. It was a weapon, something ancient and powerful that no one had ever expected. What if shutting it down caused a catastrophe? What if they triggered a chain reaction they couldn't control? But leaving it active was just as dangerous. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. Meanwhile, Zoreth's team had finally breached the last layer of Earth's surface. A loud, deep rumble echoed from below as the drill broke through. Dust and debris cascaded around them, and the ground shook violently, as if the planet itself was reacting to their intrusion. "Get ready," Zorath barked. His eyes were locked on the newly exposed passage, his senses on high alert. Whatever was down there had the potential to destroy them all. The energy they had been tracing was now fully unleashed, and he could feel its pull. His soldiers gathered around, weapons at the ready. The opening was narrow, but it led down into a vast underground chamber. As Zorath descended into the darkened depths, the temperature dropped, and the air grew thick with static electricity. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the eerie, glowing symbols etched into the walls. This was no ordinary facility. This was something far more ancient, something created by a civilization long gone. "What is this place?" Captain Torna asked, her voice barely a whisper. She was standing beside him, equally in awe of what lay before them. Zorath didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for the team to continue. He knew they were close, and they had to be cautious. They were walking on a razor's edge, and one wrong move could set off a disaster that would echo across the galaxy. The chamber seemed to stretch on forever, the walls lined with strange relics and technology that Zorath couldn't identify. The faint glow from the symbols illuminated their path, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the ground. The energy source they had traced was here, somewhere in the depths. It was what had drawn them to Earth, and it was what would define their mission's success or failure. Back at the surface, Amelia's team was growing increasingly desperate. The containment field was now flashing red, signaling that the power was about to breach its limits. The ground trembled violently, and the entire facility seemed to groan under the pressure. Amelia's mind raced. She had come too far to turn back now, but the risks were mounting. "Amelia, it's too much," Greg shouted, trying to be heard over the alarms blaring in the background. "We need to abort this now, or we'll all be caught in the explosion." Amelia stood motionless, staring at the screen in front of her. There was no going back. The answers they sought were within reach, but the energy, whatever it was, had already begun to break free. It was only a matter of time before the force below the surface tore through everything. The stakes had never been higher, and Amelia knew that whatever they unleashed would change the course of human history. Far beneath the surface, Zorath and his team were closing in on the heart of the energy source. The chamber ahead was larger than any they had encountered. A glowing, pulsating orb sat at the center, surrounded by intricate alien technology. It hummed with power, radiating an energy unlike anything they had ever seen. The orb seemed to be alive, its pulse sensing with the tremors in the ground. Zorath couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and fear as he approached it. This was the source of the galaxy's biggest mystery, and they had found it. But as he reached out to inspect the orb, the entire chamber shook violently. The walls began to crack, and the energy surge grew even stronger. Something had been triggered. "Get back!" Zorath yelled as the chamber began to collapse around them. The ground cracked open, sending debris flying, and the orb flared to life, sending out a shockwave that nearly knocked them all off their feet. Zorath's mind raced. What had they just unleashed? The power beneath Earth was far more than they had ever imagined, and now it was out of control. On the surface, Amelia felt the earth shake beneath her feet. The ground trembled as if reacting to something deep below. The energy levels skyrocketed, and the alarms on her screen went wild. This was it. The moment they had feared was here. Braced for impact, she shouted to her team. But it was too late. The unstoppable force. The ground trembled violently, shaking every inch of Earth's surface. The sky above seemed to crack open, and an unnatural light flooded the atmosphere. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. Then the shockwave hit. Zorath and his team were thrown to the ground by the immense force, their bodies crashing into the rubble as the chamber around them collapsed. The energy they had been tracking erupted from the orb. sending waves of destructive power rippling through the underground facility. The walls of the chamber cracked and groaned under the pressure. The once steady hum of the orb now echoed with a terrifying roar, growing louder with each passing second. "Get up. Now," Zoreth shouted as he struggled to his feet. His head was spinning, and his vision blurred, but he couldn't afford to stop. He had to escape. The power they had just unleashed was too dangerous, too powerful. They had no idea what kind of force they had disturbed, but one thing was certain. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature, a cataclysm waiting to happen. Captain Torna was already on her feet, pushing debris aside. "Commander, we need to leave. This place is collapsing." Zoreth nodded, his mind racing. There was no time to waste. They needed to get out before the energy surged beyond control. The ground around them buckled and cracked, sending pieces of rock and steel flying through the air. The chamber was crumbling, and the power from the orb was only getting stronger. They moved quickly, racing down the narrow corridors toward the surface. But as they approached the exit, the walls seemed to close in on them, the energy pulses growing more intense. Every step felt like it could be their last. Above ground, Amelia and her team were fighting to maintain control of the situation. The energy readings had gone off the charts, and the entire facility was shaking with each new surge. The alarms blared in the background, and the air was thick with the scent of burning equipment. The force from below was more than they had anticipated. Whatever had been released from Earth's core wasn't just an energy source, it was a weapon. And it was tearing through the planet's crust like a hot knife through butter. "Amelia," Greg shouted over the comms, his voice strained. "The energy is getting worse. We can't contain it for much longer. You need to make a decision. Shut it down now, or we lose everything." Amelia's heart raced as she watched the readings escalate beyond anything she had seen before. Every instinct told her to pull back, to stop the experiment before it destroyed everything. But something held her in place, an unshakable belief that the truth, the power beneath Earth, was worth the risk. She took a deep breath, her hands hovering over the control panels. She could feel the pressure mounting, but she refused to give in to panic. "We're not stopping," she said, her voice steady. "We're going to see this through." Back underground, Zoreth and his team had made it to the surface. The world around them was in chaos. The sky was filled with streaks of lightning, and the air crackled with static. The ground was breaking apart, fissures opening up as the energy they had unleashed tore through the planet's surface. The planet itself seemed to be fighting back, trying to contain the force it had held hidden for so long. Zoreth looked up at the sky, his eyes widening as he saw the strange, shifting colors in the atmosphere. It was as if the planet was alive, its entire being reacting to the energy that had been disturbed. This was no ordinary weapon. It was something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. "We need to get out of here," Torna shouted, pulling Zoreth from his thoughts. "It's too late. We have to retreat." But Zoreth hesitated, his eyes locked on the strange phenomenon in the sky. He could feel the pull of the energy, the raw power that was now coursing through Earth. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He could see it now, the truth that the galaxy had been so desperate to uncover. Earth was more than just a planet. It was a weapon, an unstoppable force that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Zoreth turned to Torna, his face grim. "We can't stop it now. We have to find a way to control it, or the entire galaxy is doomed." Amelia stood at the center of the chaos, watching the energy surge with a mixture of fear and awe. The readings were beyond anything she had ever imagined. It was too much for the containment field to handle, and it was too late to shut it down. The power from below was now completely uncontrollable, and the planet's surface was cracking under the strain. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. "We've lost control," Greg screamed. "We have to get out of here now." But Amelia refused to abandon her work. She was too close to the answers, too close to understanding the true power of Earth. With a steady hand, she tapped into the core systems, attempting to stabilize the energy. But it was no use. The planet was now actively fighting back, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Amelia's heart pounded as she realized the truth. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an extinction-level event. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, and it had just been unleashed. As Zoreth's team raced to escape the collapsing underground facility, the full force of Earth's hidden power was becoming clear. The planet was no longer simply a secret, it was an active living weapon. And now that it had been awakened, nothing would stop it from consuming everything in its path. Zoreth and his team barely made it to the surface as the ground shattered beneath them. The sky had turned a violent shade of red, and the air was thick with the energy of the planet's fury. It was clear now. Earth was more than just a planet. It was a death sentence for anyone who dared to challenge it. As Zoreth stood on the surface, watching the planet react to the chaos, he realized the horrifying truth. Earth had just become the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they had no way to control it. The storm that was brewing was unstoppable, and it would take more than weapons or technology to survive what was about to come. The galaxy's response. Across the galaxy, news of Earth's sudden eruption of power spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council, once confident in their control over the galaxy, now faced an existential crisis. Planets that had once dismissed Earth as a backwater world were now scrambling for answers. The mysterious power that had been dormant for eons was no longer just a curiosity. It was a threat that could obliterate entire star systems. The Council convened in a high-security meeting room, a place reserved for only the most critical matters. The members, once distant and unconcerned about Earth's fate, now sat with furrowed brows and clenched fists. They had underestimated humanity's potential, and now they were forced to confront the consequences. Zoreth stood before them, a man caught between two worlds. He had been part of the mission to uncover Earth's secrets, but now he was a prisoner of his own discovery. The planet's deadly power had far surpassed anything the Council had expected. His warnings had fallen on deaf ears, and now, it seemed, it was too late to stop the oncoming storm. "What have you done, Zoreth?" Counselor Aethera demanded, her eyes narrowed with fury. This was supposed to be a controlled investigation, not the awakening of a weapon that could tear the galaxy apart. Zoreth took a deep breath, his voice steady despite the weight of the Council's accusations. "I didn't do this. Earth was always this powerful. We just didn't know." "We didn't know," Aethera spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You should have left it alone. You and your team have unleashed a force that we cannot stop." Another counselor, Jiken, shifted in his seat, his tone far less accusatory. "What Zoreth says is true. Earth was always more than it appeared. But now that we know the truth, we must act. If we don't, the galaxy will be at the mercy of a force we can't control." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The fate of the galaxy rested on Earth, and the Council was no closer to understanding how to control or contain the power they had unleashed. The planet, once thought insignificant, had turned into a ticking time bomb, and no one knew when it would go off, or what would happen when it did. Meanwhile, on Earth, Amelia had just realized the full extent of the situation. The energy surging from below the surface was no longer just a scientific anomaly. It was a living, breathing force that was rewriting the rules of the universe. The planet itself seemed to be evolving, becoming something far beyond what humanity could comprehend. And with each passing moment, the power it radiated grew stronger, more unpredictable. "We need to shut it down. Now," Greg said, his voice frantic. He was standing next to Amelia, staring at the monitor displaying the catastrophic readings. "If we don't, it's only a matter of time before the whole planet implodes. And if that happens, the shockwave will destroy everything in its path." Amelia didn't respond immediately. She was too busy processing the data flooding her screen. The readings were off the charts. There was no stopping the energy once it had reached this critical mass. The containment systems were failing, and the core was becoming unstable. If she didn't act soon, Earth would be nothing more than a smoldering husk, and the galaxy would be dragged down with it. "We have to try," Amelia said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to contain it before it's too late." On the other side of the galaxy, a massive fleet of warships gathered near the Galactic Council's command station. The fleet was ready, prepared to launch a full-scale attack on Earth if the Council ordered it. They knew the threat Earth posed, and they knew that they were running out of time. The fleet's commander, General Keller, stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, his eyes scanning the coordinates. "We need to act fast," he said to his officers. "If Earth's power is allowed to grow unchecked, we will lose control. The Council may have been slow to react, but we are not." He turned to the holographic image of the Council, which had just called him in for an emergency meeting. "General, do we have a solution?" Counselor Ethera's voice crackled over the comms. Kaylor hesitated, a grim expression on his face. "There's nothing we can do. We can't destroy Earth without risking the collapse of the entire system. The energy is too volatile. It's beyond our technology." Another counselor, Jikin, spoke up. "Then what do you propose?" Kaller's voice was cold and steady. "We wait. We wait until the energy stabilizes. If it doesn't, we may have no choice but to engage Earth directly. But I'll need more information before we make that call." Back on Earth, time was running out. The energy had reached critical mass, and the entire planet was shaking. The ground beneath Amelia's feet seemed to shift and groan as the power from the core began to ripple through the atmosphere. She and her team were still in the facility, trying desperately to understand the force they had unleashed. But it was too late. The energy was out of their control. Every attempt to stabilize it had failed. The planet was alive, and it was changing, evolving into something far beyond humanity's understanding. The future of the galaxy, and possibly the universe, was now in the hands of a planet that had once been considered insignificant. As Amelia looked at the flickering screens around her, she knew one thing for certain. Earth had become a force of unimaginable power, and there was no turning back. The galaxy was now on the edge of a precipice, and it was clear to everyone that Earth's awakening would change everything. The fate of the galaxy was now in the hands of a force that no one could control, Earth. And as the energy continued to surge, the question that loomed in the minds of everyone was simple: would the galaxy survive, or would Earth's power destroy it all? The storm was coming, and no one knew what the outcome would be. The moment of truth. The galaxy was on the brink. Earth's power, once a mystery hidden deep beneath the planet's surface, had now become a force that threatened everything. The Galactic Council, unable to devise a solution, had resorted to desperate measures. Their fleets stood ready, poised to strike at Earth, but the unknowns were too great. Even General Keller, one of the galaxy's greatest strategists, had no idea what would happen if they attacked. Back on Earth, Amelia stood at the control center, surrounded by a team of scientists and engineers. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the energy from the planet's core continued to surge. The readings on the monitors were staggering, higher than anything they had ever expected. "We can't stop this," Greg said, his voice cracking with fear. He had worked alongside Amelia for years, but he had never seen anything like this. "If we don't do something now, it will be too late. The entire planet will." "Shah." Amelia silenced him, her focus sharp as a laser. She had one last idea, one final attempt to contain the unimaginable power. But it wasn't a certainty. If it failed, Earth would be destroyed in the process, and the consequences for the galaxy would be catastrophic. Her hands flew over the control panels, typing in commands with a speed that reflected her desperation. She had to tap into the core's energy directly, stabilize it somehow. But the risks were beyond comprehension. The galaxy's future, possibly the fate of the entire universe, rested on this single moment. "Amelia," Greg warned, "This is a last-ditch effort. If it doesn't work, Earth will not survive." Amelia turned to him, her face grim but resolute. "It's our only choice, Greg. If we don't try, everything will be lost. I can't live with that." With one final command, Amelia initiated the sequence. The energy from the core began to surge toward the containment chamber she had created, the heart of the Earth's hidden power. For a brief moment, everything went still. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the decision to be made. Then, a blinding light filled the room. The power shot up through the containment chamber like a tidal wave. The air around them hummed with an energy so powerful it made their skin tingle. "Is it working?" Greg asked, his voice barely audible above the growing noise. "I don't know," Amelia replied, her eyes fixed on the monitors. "I can only hope." Back in the Galactic Council's chambers, the situation had grown even more dire. News of Earth's response to the impending threat had spread across the galaxy. The Council had called for an emergency meeting, and every race, every system, every world was watching. Some prayed that the humans would fail, while others hoped they would succeed. The stakes were beyond imagination. Ethera stood before the Council, her eyes narrow with fear. "We are running out of time," she said. "If Earth's power reaches full force, there may be no way to contain it. The galaxy will be lost." "We must strike now," Collar, the fleet commander, insisted. "We cannot let Earth become a weapon that threatens every star system. It's too dangerous. Once we attack, there's no turning back." Jaken, the cautious counselor, reminded them. "We must be certain. If Earth's power is truly this immense, we may destroy it ourselves." The Council fell silent, unsure of what to do. The tension in the room was palpable as they watched Earth's every move on the holographic map before them. Back on Earth, the energy from the core began to stabilize. The surge of power slowly diminished, and for a moment, the room was still. But then, the ground trembled once more. This time, it wasn't from the unstable energy. It was from something else, something far more frightening. A massive tremor shot through the entire planet, so strong that it rattled buildings, cracked streets, and sent shockwaves through the atmosphere. The energy readings spiked again, far higher than before. The core had reached a new level of power. It wasn't just contained anymore, it was alive. And it was waking up. Amelia stared in horror as the monitors flickered. It's changing," she whispered. The energy had evolved into something that defied their understanding. The shipyards of the Galactic Council, the advanced fleets ready to strike, now had no idea what they were facing. Their technology, designed to destroy, was no match for what Earth had become. Earth had changed from a planet into something far more, an entity that could shape the future of the galaxy. But the question still lingered in the air. Would Earth be a savior or a destroyer? "Prepare the fleets," General Kaler ordered. "We cannot wait any longer." The countdown had begun. The galaxy stood on the edge of destruction, and as the fleets prepared for their final strike, they knew there was no going back. Amelia stood before the control panel, watching the energy readings with a sinking heart. It was too late for caution now. The moment of truth was upon them. Would Earth's new power bring salvation, or would it bring the galaxy to its knees? The fate of everything now rested on one final choice. Would the people of Earth be able to control the power they had awakened, or would it consume them all? As the fleets began to launch, the galaxy held its breath, knowing that in the next few moments, everything would change. Forever.